Okay, we are on and people are starting to connect. Guys, we'll get straight into it today because I'm sure this conversation is going to be a very interesting one. We've had the opportunity to catch up a few times now, but I just, as people are starting to connect, wanted to welcome everyone to episode 2 of the Hayylo Insights webinar, Operationalising Wellbeing. Just to kind of set the scene for the conversation today, in a kind of a post-COVID world, we've seen a push towards localised and more personalised care teams, a deeper community connection, and I guess what I would kind of call a light shining on the emerging science around the effect, wellbeing can have on physical health outcomes. Generally speaking, I think as we all know, aged care and health in general is based kind of on diagnosis and service delivery a lot of the time, yet over the past few years, the government and in a way society in general is starting to focus on the positive and economic impacts wellbeing can have on the individual's health and the escalating economic challenges faced by the health sector. And I think we've seen with initiatives such as the Royal Commission, consumer-directed care, and even the quality standards, they're all really shining a light on the subject. And the sector really is now challenged with the difficult task of implementing wellbeing into service delivery. So today I'm very, very excited to be joined by CEO of Meaningful Aging Australia, Ilsa Hampton, and Head of Growth for Strategic Accounts at Hayylo, Meg Braithwaite. I've got it Meg this time, not Megan, so I've got you covered there. And to dive into this exciting subject. So look, thank you both for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. Look, let's get straight into it. Ilsa, Meaningful Aging Australia, you're the national peak body for spiritual care in aging, and it's a concept, as we said, that's starting to take prominence in the health sector, and really with the evolving understanding of the intersection between the mind and the body and the soul, and really practices that start to kind of enable, what I would call self-healing and hopefully ultimately better health outcomes. But maybe to kick things off today, could you tell us a little bit about your work with Meaningful Aging and exactly what the S word is, spirituality?
I hope we didn't lose too many people when you mentioned that, Simon, because it is a word that can create a lot of anxiety for people, and we get that because it's a word that has, a checkered history. In the past, it was assumed that spirituality and religion were one and the same. And we know that people's experience of religion, for some, extremely positive and really great thing in their life. For others, not at all, and others, not so much. So if you keep them bundled together like that, it can really create a sense of disturbance in people when they hear the word spirituality, and indeed a kind of a shutting down. Which is ironic because it's the opposite to what it's all about. So actually, over the last few decades, there's been a mountain of research internationally around spirituality and kind of trying to describe it and look at how it fits into people's lives and what it means for people. If you do start looking at the published literature, there's not one all-time agreed definition, and that causes some anxiety amongst researchers, as you can imagine, because it's very hard to then repeat studies and things if we're not even agreeing on what the thing is. But on the other hand, given its nature, which I'll get to, probably we shouldn't ever say we've got it completely worked out. Otherwise, I don't know, we might be overstating the case. I think it's a bit like trying to say I can explain love. I mean, how do you do that? So it's why there's so many poems and things written about love, the songs. So spirituality, in broad terms, if you do look at the definitions internationally and the published literature, there are some repeated themes that come up. So we work with those themes, and they're around meaning, purpose, and connectedness in people's lives. And then there are some specific domains of connectedness that, again, come up in literature. So it's connection with self, with others, with creativity, with nature, and with something bigger. And that's a nice Australian term that researcher Julie Fletcher came up with, something beyond ourselves. So some people have a name for that. It might be the sacred, the transcendent, God, Allah, etc. And for some people, religion has a role in there. So religion is an expression of spirituality, that spirituality can be expressed in a whole myriad of different ways, and people would straight away be starting to think about some of the words that I've mentioned. Oh, okay, this is an important connection for me. So it's very varied, which is wonderful, but that also makes it a little bit difficult for organisational systems to wrestle with because it is so contextual.
Yeah, I love that. I love also the concept, as you know, talking about trying to define love. You know, real when you think about it, it's about trying to build, you know, language around something that is beyond words in a sense, and it's nearly a thankless task in a way. So I love how we're starting to form as a society, you know, the words and language around these kind of concepts. To maybe take it kind of down a few steps, you know, when we're thinking about maybe the care environment, aged care, community services, and wellbeing in general, you know, why should providers be thinking about spirituality and well-being when, you know, as we we're speaking to before this, they are so busy with the important things of service delivery, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've got a couple of answers to that. The first one for me is, well, how can you not? Because if everyone has a spirituality, everyone may not use the word spirituality, which is absolutely fine, but everyone needs to have some connection with meaning and purpose in their life, and everyone needs those webs of relationships and for those things to support their inner world, which will actually reduce depression, reduce anxiety, and increase resilience, kind of by the way. But it's intuitively, we know that this has to be included because this is the essence of our humanity. So if we think that we can have a kind of care interaction with someone, or a series of care interactions with someone that ignores that component, it's like, well, what? Okay, so maybe there's a moral and a kind of ethical obligation on service providers to engage with this. But if that kind of doesn't, you know, fry people's bacon, then let's go for regulation. So actually the aged care quality standards are really clear that organisations need to be understanding and responding to people's spiritual needs. And given what I've been talking about, I hope people have already kind of realised we're also talking about psychological, emotional and social support. Like, all of these things are interconnected. It's not that you can talk about someone's spirituality over here and it's got no connection to those other elements of kind of what makes them who they are and how they find their place in the world. You know, identity, which is a classic, you know, in that standard one, maintain their identity. I mean, what does that even mean? But if you think about, identity, like what makes me who I am, it's those webs of relationships. Most of the, a bit of personality, and then there's culture and all those other things thrown in, and it's all interacting.
I think there's also, you know, emerging science, as I was kind of referring to before, around, you know, how that actually affects, you know, the physical world or the physical body, and, you know, and that will ultimately provide, you know, better health outcomes. And what about you, Meg? You know, where do you see this? You can either start with around, you know, your kind of understandings, or why providers should be focusing on these concepts of spirituality and well-being.
Well, I think that, as Ilsa just, you know, outlined, the focus is pretty clear. And I don't think providers, you know, my experience to date has been that I think providers are very open to this, as in for the most part, there's an awareness that this needs to be built in to the conversations and the care and the service delivery. As per, you know, the heading of our webinar today, it's making that real, it's operationalizing it and oftentimes at scale. And, you know, that's really where the devil's in the detail there, right? Because it's actually quite hard, and there's a lot to unpack, which is why we have a webinar today, because it's not always just about the things that come to mind around time or enablement of time to have these conversations. It's actually much larger. There's a greater web at play there around resourcing, around the funding that sits under the service delivery, around the tool sets that we provide. And so my experience with this has actually been really from the ground up at a granular level, when working with providers around how they operationalized, for that word, all those moving parts. So all of those little things that I just, you know, spoke about at a granular level operationally, I happen to have that experience, you know, weirdly, this experience for the last 10 years, you know, across the country, multiple providers, and the only consistent thing about it is that it's all inconsistent. So there's literally, it's random. Every single provider was handling this process, if at all, which is the big question mark, very, very differently. And I find that concerning because we've got this lofty and great aged care standard, which again is probably going to be changing sometime soon for the better as things evolve. It's going to get better, hopefully. Let's be positive.
Time will tell.
That's right. But really, you know, I think we've got the capacity now, and I know we're going to get into this in a little while, but to start influencing what we need at a granular level to make those things a reality, and at the end result get to the client outcomes that we know we want, which is to have a happy, healthy well-being, or the opportunity for that to exist with clients that we serve. So I have always felt very passionately about this, as you can probably tell. It's my common soapbox, and it's deeply related to, I think, that process that we enable around what we call care planning. And so, that's been my experience to date, is that we tie these things into these known operational frameworks that we have built over time. And really, I think it's at this point, you know, with the aged care, with the Royal Commission and everything changing, that we need to probably take a step back and go, those frameworks just aren't working. It's not working. They've failed. And now's some time for some really great design thinking around not falling back on pre-existing known things, because that's easy, around actually putting some fresh minds to this and thinking, how can we do this differently? And I'm very excited by that. I think that there's some very exciting opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe to kind of dig into that a little bit, I'd be interested to maybe start, Ilsa, with yourself, and then Meg, because we speak about this quite a lot, Meg, here at Hayylo. But what have been the challenges up until now? Can maybe, Ilsa, from what you've seen, obviously trying to promote tool sets into the sector and things, do you have an experience or opinion on why these things haven't been more prevalent up until now?
Yeah, there's a document called the National Guidelines for Spiritual Care and Aged Care, which was government funded through a grant. Some people might be aware of them. They're really quite useful. But there was some really interesting intel. There was a big consultation process that happened as part of their development, as well as the literature review. There was lots of discussion with the sector about these concepts and how well they were currently being embedded in aged care services and what the barriers were. And the barriers came up as leadership not valuing / not understanding what it's all about, and complete lack of resourcing as well. So those sort of some of the key things. And at that time also, another one was that there was no kind of external pressure because it wasn't in the regulations. So in the old common standards for community care and the residential care standards, the only place where any of this sort of had a bit of a go was 3.8, which I referred to as the dreaded 3.8 in residential, was cultural and spiritual. But you just sub in the word religious, you have a priest come in once a quarter, tick a box, done, and it was so thin. So those issues around sort of leadership not really understanding or valuing, which is, in the end, that's really going to drive, if we're talking about, Meg's talking about systems that just aren't really fit for purpose anymore. That has to be driven by leadership. It's not something people at the front line are going to be able to transform themselves. And that has continued as a theme. So we've made various attempts from various angles to address those barriers. And I was mentioned just before we came on the call that we've got some Monash University students working with us right now to dig in a bit further to try and get past leadership don't get it and we don't have time, just to see, what else we might be able to do to help organisations, even while we know there's going to be, further changes down the track once the Royal Commission recommendations have been wrestled with.
So do you mind if I just to carry on that theme, because it's something that interests me a lot, just on the leadership theme, Ilsa, is that, so I've listened to quite a few webinars and podcasts since the release of the Royal Commission report, as I'm sure we're all a bit, neck deep in all of that right now. And some of it has of course been exceptionally interesting. But a really resounding theme that as I was listening to, probably my third one on the day, but was, they were deferring back to government to make decisions. So when the government decides on, or we're really looking for the government's response to, and I have to say this bugged me quite a lot, because government, in this ethereal sort of concept that they were placing up in there, is allowed to sort of be like this, room of silent men, in hats with no faces type thing. And I really resist that. Government are individuals that are hired by us, they're elected to enact our will. And how are they going to know what to enact if we're not telling them what is needed? So why are we waiting for government to tell us what to do? I really think it needs to be the reverse. And so then we get a consensus around what's actually required at a grassroots level. What is it that we need? And then that comes through. And that's really where I was turning to there, or pivoting to leadership, because we actually have some fantastic leaders in this country, in this space. I'm really waiting for that collective input of all of that nous to come through, and that muscle to be exercised at a government level, because this I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't want to hear I'm waiting for government. We've been busy telling government what's required for years, and that's come out of 20 odd prior reports. It's nothing's new there in that regard. So, I would really back that. I would really back that it's really up to the people that are in those seats right now to really step up and exercise that muscle that they have there. And it's time to get in under the covers and learn what this is all about, and embrace the outcomes that we know are directly linked to it. So, my challenge to them, I think, over to you.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Ilsa, go please.
I was just going to say, another piece in the puzzle that we could see was, around community demand, and whether people are expecting that aged care services would be actually treating them as a whole person. Because, and actually the things that people are saying about aged care now, it breaks my heart, because it feels like it's getting worse and worse in terms of the narrative, and I know it's a massive overstatement, but just the fear levels are sort of going like this. And again, like you wouldn't feel afraid to engage with aged care services if there was a sense of expectation that I will be seen, I will be known, I will be, dare I say, loved, treated with respect, understood and supported. And that's what provoked our piece of work we did, sort of community-facing work in 2019, the See Me, Know Me campaign, was to try to start to build some literacy amongst the older population who were not yet accessing aged care. And, I think that there's something maybe there for the leaders in aged care, as well as government, to, if we can work together to increase community expectations about actually what's on offer, then I think we're all winners there. But everyone also knows that no one wants to talk about aged care, like apart from saying it's terrible, but any sort of idea of future planning, all of this, it's a well-known challenge. But I don't think we should give up on it.
No, not at all. Yeah, I love that kind of concept as you're talking about around, coming from leadership. And I guess it's an interesting thing when we're talking about spirituality, because it must be hard and challenging for anyone, the community or a leader, to be talking about spirituality, maybe if they're not focusing on those spiritual practices themselves. I have a quote that I love, that is, change the world by changing yourself. And, maybe it requires more inner reflection from us as a society in general to start to shift that dial, because maybe it's things that we kind of don't talk about. But without getting too lofty about it, and Meg, you and I have spoken about this again quite a bit, but I'd like to kind of keep digging into some of the kind of challenges, and then talk a little bit about how we start to implement these things. But on a provider sense, we've spoken a little bit about care planning, the draining forms and things that are out there. What are some of the things that are kind of holding us back on a tactical or administrative level from these things?
Yeah, again, my experience, please understand, is fairly limited in terms of its in that it's my focus has been at enablement of tech across large scale, community care providers in enabling business processes to support, whatever it is that they were doing at that time. One of those areas happened to be around care planning. And so, my experience with that is that there's no defined tool sets or assessments really for them to use. As we were just talking before we jumped on formally to kick this off, there's whilst there is very well known validated clinical assessments that are drawn on, hopefully in a tech-based capacity, but often not, usually in a manual-based capacity. But there's no, I guess what's missing is, this is how you create a care plan. This is what it needs to look like. This is what it needs to say. These are the areas and the domains you need to cover, and so on and so on. And indeed, it's often up to the provider to create that really out of thin air, and they don't have time for that. And that's actually very true. And so really, as we said, that it's a lot of the, working in the business, not on the business. And, day to day things just keep carrying on because we have to just keep seeing clients, and new clients are onboarded, and, time just inches away from us. And then every now and again, something will happen where, as we were saying, it goes into the quadrant of urgent and important, and it gets a focus. But largely, I would say in summary that there's no defined tool set for providers to innately turn to and be able to use. And that's got to be a combination, of course, of both the clinical validated assessment tools where required, but also the non-assessment tools. How we should be enabling that first meeting and what's asked. How we proposition that encounter. How do we promote the relationship to enable those responses that we want from the clients to better get to know them and what they're going to need from a service. Now, I certainly don't want to paint the picture that never happens, but in large instances that didn't happen. And so one of the large operational barriers is that capacity to have non-standardized assessment pieces and also have that directly aligned to what that service plan then needs to be in a very pragmatic sense, and what that then needs to also align to in an overarching goal progress benchmarking layer. And that also doesn't exist. So there's so much wrapped up into that around resource training, standardized assessments, time. Quite a while ago, the government removed quite a lot of funding to support case management in general. And so a lot of the time that would have been involved in or allowed to get to know clients through that interaction was removed. And so another really key point, just if I can just keep going for just 1 second, is that a care plan is going to be different in structure and requirement based on the acuity and who that client is. And so it's really very important that people understand that there's not one size fits all. And so what a plan of care and how you get to know a client is going to be different for disability-based services. It's going to be different for clients that are on CHSP current funding right now. It's going to be different to a home care package level 4. It's going to be different to those in palliative care. And so as you are on that spectrum, the needs will change, and so will the time commitment and so on and so on. So in summary, it is non-standardized assessments, lack of time, lack of focused funding to support and enable that, and then also lack of awareness around why these things are important to do persistently, so that you can get some great metrics at the other end around progress overall. Yeah.
So Ilsa, obviously Meaningful Aging Australia has some fantastic tools, that are starting to close that gap a little bit. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about some of those tools and techniques that you are deploying in what is a subjective kind of process for most people?
Sure. There's a big question there, or big comment. Do you want to deal with that, or we'll come back to that later?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Let's have a look.
Can see from Natalie.
Oh, there's a lot in here. I think it would take us a little while to kind of get
Yes.
through those, and we might follow up on some of these ones post the webinar. Ilsa, so if I can have a little read if you wanted to kind of dive in a little bit to some of those tool sets that you're using.
Sure. So one framework that people may have heard us talking about before if they've tuned into Meaningful Aging's work is, and I've got a little bit of show and tell here, but this is it's called the Map of Meaning, which is a really interesting evidence-based framework to really understand meaning in your own life or a person's life through these particular lenses. And it's got, you'll see these quadrants here. So it's we've been working with it in the context of aging, but it's not particular to aging. It was developed with people from a whole range of cultural backgrounds and ages. Those quadrants are unity with others. So there's that relationships kind of, okay. So one way that people have a sense of meaning in their life is to do with sort of what's happening with those relationships. And that doesn't have to be close relationships. It can just be even people you're interacting with, at the shops, or just that sense of unity with others. Expressing full potential. Yeah, so that opportunity to stretch. And I really love this one in the context actually of aging, and particularly with aged care services, because whether you're community care or residential, how often is the organisation encouraging you to actually think about, what are your opportunities to express your full potential? And we know that the answers to that are going to be so varied, and there are, some limitations which I'll come to in a moment. But that's also a really important way that we have a sense of meaning in life, is having that opportunity to express full potential, keep growing. Integrity with self. So the way that we frame this is around living in keeping with your values. Now, to do that, you need to have actually thought about what your values are. But I was actually, just as a total aside, I was at a pet food place this morning, and the woman serving me had this really beautiful tattoo of an elephant with a baby elephant. The baby elephant, was, how they hold on to the tail of the elephant in front. It was really gorgeous. And there's some writing at the bottom. I was like, wow, that's amazing. What does it say? And she said, my mum and I have got matching ones, and it says, I am because you are. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was tearing up in the pet food shop, I just thought it was so beautiful. And it got me thinking about tattoos and how, like, I don't know if anyone's done a study, and maybe they could tell us in the chat if you have, on the meaning of people's tattoos and how much tattoos are expressing someone's values. Like, it is a way to wear your heart on your sleeve, like these are the things that are important to me. So, maybe we could think about, if we don't want to get a tattoo, what are our ultimate kind of values that are, something that is a key driver for us. So knowing what our values are, but then am I living in keeping with them? So am I pulling against my values, or am I living in keeping with my values? There's an idea called moral injury, which has been coming up particularly through defence, but now it's getting recognised in more places. And I actually think there's quite a lot of moral injury in aged care. People are coming in, I'm here to serve, I want to make a difference, but actually I have to run from A to B to C to D and leave these people yelling out for help or whatever it is. Not everywhere. We know that there's a lot of brilliant aged care, but in the kind of the worst end of it, that's the scenario. So integrity with self, so that's being challenged for those staff, but also older people. What are the chances for them to live and keep with their values? And then the fourth one, which is the easiest, which is why I left it for fourth, and it's also a really good one. It's absolute gold for aged care services: service to others. Yeah. Service to others. So we feel like life is meaningful if we are serving others. Now, easy for us that are doing things to try to help the aged care sector. Why do we keep coming back to do this? Because it's meeting our needs for meaning. Okay, so now what's happening with the older people? What conversations are we having with them about their opportunity to be of service? Now, as a service provider, that can really do your head in, because it's like, well, I'm here to do some things to help you out. But what if we said to them, okay, how would you like to be of service? How are you being of service? What are your opportunities? So that's the quadrants. So those ones there. Okay. Yeah. Now, around the whole thing, gosh, I'm doing a good job actually drawing that.
You are. That's very impressive.
In a camera. I was like, amazing. Okay, that reality of self. Okay, reality of self. and circumstance. So sometimes wellbeing literature or things you might come across maybe down the kind of self-help end can be a bit pie in the sky. And actually, if you just, chant this thing 10 times at 2:00 every afternoon, then you're suddenly going to get $1 million or, whatever the things are. But this is really grounded actually in real people's lives. So reality of self and circumstance. So all of these things, integrity with self, unity with others, service to others, expressing full potential, it's all in a context. Okay, and if you know anything about public health, it's really big and something I love about it. It's about context, it's about settings. So, and I do struggle a bit sometimes where people try to be positive about aging, which I'm all for, but it can be almost like over the top in terms of you can do anything. You cannot be and do anything. I'm sorry, everyone, I've got bad news for you. You cannot be and do anything. Okay, you have limitations in your life. It might be money, it might be health, all sorts of things.
And you see that in the representation of aging in the media and even with organisations that promote aging, like pink feather boas and, this kind of exorbitant, nearly, perception of what aging is. And I think probably that reality check makes sense.
Yeah. And it's awkward. We don't want to sort of be naysayers either, because trying to crack open the mold, of sort of an older person who's sort of doesn't do anything, just sort of sits there being depressed or whatever, like that's awful, and we definitely don't want that. But again, because it's about our humanity, like the truth lies somewhere in the middle, doesn't it? And then also something that's really fantastic about this framework are these arrows here. So these are the inherent tensions, if you like. So being and doing. Okay, that tension between being and doing, and you would know in your own life, sometimes you are so far out on the doing that you are just starting to really, you just fragmented. I don't know if that sounds too esoteric, but okay, I need some to get back to being. I need to be here. I need to be present. But if we're completely, just 24/7 sort of meditating and, having, I don't know, like grass smoothies or whatever it is, it's not going to be great either. So the truth is somewhere, again, that tension being, and sometimes there'll be a balance, over time, like one period or one season might be more one in the other. And then the other arrows sort of going, I can't quite, these ones here, is self and others. Okay, self and others. So intuitively we know that's true. We do need time with others. We do need to be serving others. But again, if the balance is out, we will end up actually not thriving. That kind of overall well-being is disrupted. So trying to find some ultimate balance, and again, it could be over a week or a month or a year or seasons. And so for some older people, they may have had a life of service, and so it is important to keep serving, but actually it might be time now for a bit more self and a bit more being. So that's one framework. I'll pause there. I've got, of course, lots of other tools to talk about, but I've been talking a lot.
Sorry, Meg, please.
Wonderful, I was going to say, because really that's what it's all about. I love the fact that Meaningful Aging have gone to that point of creating the validated tool sets to be able to then incorporate into the BAU, and we start to sort of really, I think, knock down those myths around how, that person-centered approach, or, it's the most overused term in the world, but that enablement of having these broader conversations around what's going to be important for them in their care and just day-to-day life is put front and center. Indeed, actually probably hopefully comes first, rather than second to all of the other primary assessments that they might have around needs-based care. So I think I think it's wonderful, Ilsa, that you do that. And for everyone that's on, I've been through your website end to end, so I've gotten myself familiar with all of it. But for anyone dialing in, I would really encourage them also to do that, so that they're familiar with, because I think that's a lot of the problem. Most organizations that I was interacting with weren't aware that there were these validated tool sets that they could utilize and bring through. And it's one thing to whack it in the 10 or so assessment folder to ship out. It's another thing to actually have a trained workforce that approaches this with really the right mindset and the right attitude. And I really love digging into this because there is so much positive outcome that comes for not only the client, but for the worker and for the organization as well. There's these very correlated links between, in fact, actually one of the podcasts or the feature writers that you were partnering with, Dr. Kathy Balding, I think it's Dr.
Yes,
Kathy.
it is. Yeah.
I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. She had a feat, or Dr. Kathy Balding presented on compassion and working that through into quality standards effectively, and the benefits of that. And really, a part of that was really advising that compassion is really sort of like this interchangeable term between empathy and patient-centered care as well. They're really sort of interchangeable type terms that we could use. It's all linked. It's all, obviously that does make sense. But if anyone who hasn't listened to that podcast, No Harm Done, I think it is, where she features with Dr. Kathy Jones as well, it's just wonderful. And so she spoke about this compassion economics, I think was a book that they were referring to. But the reason why I went to that was because I liked the correlation that all of that research around this term of compassion, if I interchange that for right now, that had validated evidence-based research sitting behind it around all of these fantastic outcomes that are there for both clients and organizations at a finance level, at a workforce level. And it was just so interesting to hear. And for any other nurse-based skeptic that's dialed in, as I would very much be, on that frame as well, it's really so wonderful to see, because the point is as I think they make, it can be validated and it can be taught. And those are the two really key things at an operational level, for this webinar. I really wanted to ensure people had an awareness over that there are validated tool sets that are evidence-based in their expertise that can be utilized. And there are really fantastic materials around training and how these things can be taught very easily, and how they can be adopted into business as usual actually very easily. So it's about, as they say, myth busting a little bit around the fact that it's going to take too much time, or I actually already am empathetic and I already do this in my day-to-day, when in fact, actually, the reality is we know that that's actually probably very different. The client's experience of that, as your recent experience is not centered. It's not valid. So there's, in any case, I thought that tool sets such as Meaningful Aging that are providing these validated tool sets, along with this emergence of other validated tool sets that are in alignment, there's really no excuse anymore. We have tool sets now that we can embed in. And it's just making sure that we give the room and the time and the guidance to the workforce to enable those conversations to happen in real life.
Yeah, Meg, that's, it's great. And there's some amazing comments and that are coming through the feed at the moment. And I won't be able to get to them today, because I did want to go back to you, Ilsa, because I know we were going to try and do a little bit of an exercise at the end of today. But there was an interesting comment that was talking, about, community services being somewhat undignified at times. And imagine if you applied the same principles we're talking about today to the workforce as well, and help them with the value alignment piece, and even the informal carers and the family members as well. If we could even reach a little bit wider, the impacts of those peripheral people in that circle of care, so to speak, the impacts of that could be large for us. But we are running at time today. For others that want to stick around, Ilsa, did you still have something that you may be able to run us through today as a little bit of a self-reflection exercise?
I do. Can I do an ad for one of our resources before that?
You can do an ad for anything that you like. Yeah, after today, no problem.
So we do use validated. We've got validated tools and things, but we also, one of the things that we do is to try to make life easier for the service providers is take that evidence and then turn it into something practical. So it's a translation kind of exercise. And our most recent product that I'm really proud of is Meet Akira, which is a digital learning experience for personal carers. So I'm quite passionate about personal carers because they're the bulk of the workforce, and they're just not well enough resourced. The training is not good enough. The pay is not good enough. The condition, the time.
Absolutely.
And so Meet Akira is a way to introduce personal carers to the idea that spiritual care is part of their work. And again, you know, what does it look like? So the way spiritual care happens varies depending on the person's role. And so for personal carers, it's the kindness, compassion and respect. You know, it's what's happening in that relational space between them and the older person. And it uses a story format. We've co-designed it with personal carers and academic service providers and older people. So that's an example of something we've designed specifically to help the aged care sector reach all of their personal carers in a way that you know, understands the constraints, I guess, of the current system, and a platform that can be built on as well. So we're doing some further developments as we go along with that. So keep an eye out for that one if people are interested. And yeah, so the little activity that we thought you might be interested to try is using, again, another framework. It's from a PhD by a woman called Julie Fletcher. She's an Australian. That's something else that we're trying to do, is increase the Australian evidence in this space and the translation of Australian resources. So I'm going to do a little screen share, but if possible, it'd be good if you people out there had a piece of paper and a pen. You don't have to. You can just picture it. Look, Simon's ready there.
I came prepared for this today. I'm ready. I'm ready for the value realignment.
And it's just, so this is actually, this is one of our guides that tells you, you know, how to train people to use this particular tool. So we've set it up so that you can use it with older people. But also, guess what? The best way to learn about it is to try it for yourself. And you're right, Simon, like all of these things we're talking about apply just as much to the workforce, to families and other networks as it does to the older person, which is fantastic. You know, it's back to our commonality. You know, I may not be a 95-year-old accessing residential care, but I'm a person, I'm a human, you know, and I've got certain, you know, needs, wants, desires, you know. So let's have a little play with this. It's just a little self-reflection. Of course, it's not a test. We're not going to ask you to send in, you know, the results.
Oh. I don't get it. I can't win this.
No,
I'm
you
out.
can't win
I
this,
can't
no
win it.
prize.
I
The
don't want to be
competitive
involved.
vibe just went straight out the door.
That's right. I can't beat Meg. Okay, I'm out.
No, you cannot beat me. Okay. So this image here is, oh, sorry, my share's just gone to the back. I'll just try that again. The image is from where we were launching the tool originally, and was in, there we go.
Yeah, awesome.
So we've got a resident in the middle, and we had, we were trying to think of something physical that we could do. And so we had the idea of ribbons representing the different domains. Now, you remember people that were here at the start, you heard me talking about the domains of connectedness that come up in the literature as really important for people's spirituality. So that's what this is built around, and we've adapted Julie's work to make it something that could be more readily understood and used in an aged care context, but we've had interest from palliative care and hospitals and all sorts of places in this. So on your piece of paper, I want you to draw a circle, not too big. So it's about a 50-cent piece. So ultimately, I'm holding up my example here. It's going to look like this, but I'm just going to talk you through so you don't get confused with numbers of circles. So just one in the middle, big enough to write a word in. Okay, and now we're going to draw some circles around that middle one. So it should look like this. So the middle one, I've got it green. You don't have to colour it in. And you can see there's one at the bottom that's got like a little friend next to it, a companion. So you'll have one in the middle, and then there's 6 other circles. Okay? You got that? Sometimes when I do this, very good, Simon. You win. Oh, very good, Meg. You win.
My validation coming out there. I need to be validated for my actions. So that's
sometimes
great.
if I do this live with a group, people just start cacking up, like laughing because of what happens with their circles. But anyway, all right, let's just stay focused. Okay. All right. Now, in that first circle in the middle, write the word self. Okay, so your middle one, that middle circle, write the word self. Okay, and now in a circle kind of, you know, maybe at the top there, write the word self again. So you've got self in the middle and then self in one of the smaller ones. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to have a think now about your connection with yourself. Do a little check-in. How's it going? How connected do I feel with myself? So is that, are you able to drop pretty quickly into that, oh, yep, I know how I'm traveling? Or have you been so far out there for so long that you're actually not quite sure sort of what she's even talking about? So just notice, okay? And you might like to draw a line. So you could draw a dotted line or a solid line or a wiggly line, or you might like to just jot down a word or two that's popped into your mind. So just noticing how connected you feel with yourself at the moment. Okay, in one of the other circles, so maybe one sort of at the sides, write the word nature. Nature. Have a think about what it is in nature. Is there something in nature that's really important for you? So it might be the beach, it might be the surf, it might be a creek, big trees, pot plant that I'm desperately trying to keep alive in my kitchen. What is it in nature that's important for you? And just notice, how connected do you feel at the moment with that part of nature? How connected do you feel? So, if it was the surf, might be, oh my gosh, I actually haven't been surfing for 2 years. Okay, or it's a big tree, and actually I visit my big tree every afternoon on my way home. So just notice what it is that's important for you and how connected do you feel to that part of nature. Now, again, draw a line or jot down some words. You could do a really strong line, a wiggly line, a dotted line, or just jot down some words that have popped into your mind while you're thinking about what it is in nature that's important for you and how connected you feel. The next one is creativity. So by now you will know the pattern we're following. So what is it in creativity that's important for you? And some people draw a bit of a blank with this one, no, nothing really, and that's okay. But there are a lot of people for whom some aspect of creativity is important. Often it's about making something with our hands. So maybe it's some metalworking that we do, or do we make candles, or is it our cooking or knitting, or often gardening comes up here along with, in the nature one. So what is it in creativity? Maybe it's actually going to shows, to live shows, or maybe it's participating in a choir. What is it in creativity that's important for you? And how connected do you feel at the moment to that part of creativity? Is it really strong? Are you drawing a thick connected line there? Is it, oh, actually, I love playing the keyboard, but I haven't touched a keyboard for 10 years. Just notice what in creativity is important for you and how connected do you feel. Jot down a word, draw a line. Okay, next circle. We're writing the word others, and this is in the circle over at the side. Others. Who are those others where you feel most at home? Where are those important relationships? It may be people that you see often, or it may not. But who are those others that are really important for you? And how connected do you feel at the moment? Is it really strong? Or maybe it's a bit wobbly, or maybe there's a bit of a blank space there. Just notice who are the others and how connected do you feel? Again, draw a line, jot down some words. Okay, now we've got our companion circles. So one has the words something bigger, and the other one next to it has the word religion. Now, this is one that can be quite sensitive for people. So we're not saying you have to believe in something bigger, but it is true that a lot of people do have a sense of something beyond themselves. They feel like they're part of a bigger story. They have a conversation with whatever it is that they might call that. So it might be the universe, the sacred, the transcendent, some sense of something beyond themselves. I would also put in here when we talk to people that have died, they might also fit in our others. area. But quite often we do have some kind of sense of relationship with something beyond ourselves. And as we said earlier, for some people, that will be also connected with religion. We know that there's a lot of people where it's not connected with religion, but there are also a lot of people for whom it is connected with religion. So this is an opportunity to hold both of those spaces, and you go with whatever's going to fit for you. So if you do have a sense of something bigger or beyond yourself, how is that going? How connected do you feel with that something beyond at the moment? Is it something that you give a lot of time and energy, or has it been sort of left at the bottom of the list for the last few months? Do you have particular practices that help to keep you in touch with that sense of something bigger or not? Just notice, is this something that's important for you? And if it is, how connected are you feeling to that at the moment? Again, draw a line, jot down some words, whatever's popped into your mind. And just as we wrap this little reflection up, the final thing for you to do is to think about one small action that you will take as a result of what we've just been doing. One small action. So it could be something you want to start doing. It might be something you want to keep doing, or it could be something you want to stop doing. Just keep it modest, okay? One small action. And see if you can make a commitment to check in with yourself, maybe in a week's time, to see how you're going with that one small action. If you dare, you might like to share it with a friend, because then they could also ask you how you're going with that thing. But that's kind of taking it, that bit out there. So you may not be comfortable with that. But that is connect to. And that is a conversation that I wish every aged care service had with every older person first. And then, Meg, we do the care planning.
That's right. Because it's connected.
That was amazing. Yeah, that was really interesting. It's amazing how much it starts to bring up these parts of yourself you may not be putting time or energy into. I actually felt a few of those really kind of hit home, where I actually became emotional thinking through the process. And I've got some work to do by the looks of things. But yeah, that was great. And Meg, any last reflections for yourself before we finish up today? We've obviously gone a little bit over time, but
yes, it's always with me. But I think Ilsa, that was just fabulous. If anything, it proves we just don't give ourselves that moment in time to do that. I'm a very time poor mother of 3 that works full time, and I'm the least likely candidate to stop and have this moment. So like you, Si, I look at that and I'm like, well, I'm not doing so hot, am I? There's a lot of work to do there. But it's just so wonderful. And I think the ability for us to draw those parallel lines, or connected lines between those important things within a person's life, what they label as being, for now, this is what's important to me, and how we then assist that in a day-to-day capacity, drawing those lines, those very hard lines, they're not grey, I think is exceptionally important into meeting our goals of enabling a greater well-being for everybody in care, as we would all want when we get there too.
Exactly. Thank you guys so much, Ilsa. That was amazing. And to everybody that joined us today, we will creatively think of a way to respond to your amazing comments and questions. We might even do a follow-up video, if you don't mind, where we can chat about some of those concepts that came out, because there's some amazing insights that came through the chat there. And I just want to send a lot of love to everybody out there in our networking community. And thanks, Meg. Thanks, Ilsa and the Hayylo team for organising this one. That was a special one. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.